So what were the best, and indeed worst, albums of 1971? Let's get into it, shall we? "1971 was a year that glittered and sparkled with emerging new sounds associated with the burgeoning glam scene. As performers, all eyeliners and sequins brightened our front rooms and made it acceptable to go out wrapped in baker foil like a Christmas turkey, giblets out in some cases. On a more serious note, we also saw the Ibrox disaster that, due to a crush, 66 people were killed and 200 injured in Glasgow, Scotland. Charles Manson is sentenced to death in the United States, a sentence that would be later commuted to life imprisonment. Certain cultural landmarks worth mentioning. We saw the release of A Clockwork Orange and Get Carter. Interestingly, All in the Family, that American sitcom, is first aired in January of this year. And Mr. Tickle, the first book in the Mr. Men series, is first published in the UK. But it was an exciting and eventful year for music as well. Led Zeppelin debut Stairway to Heaven live in Belfast for the first time. Nina Simone's lovely covers album Here Comes the Sun is released. And Jim Morrison dies of heart failure in Paris, aged 27. His reputation never fully recovering after that disastrous Miami 1969 incident.
You guys want to see something? You want to see if it's as big as they say it is?
What the hell is he doing now?
That night marked the end of Jim Morrison's rock god status, when he was unable to find and expose his penis in a Florida music venue. Like every man who can't find his penis, Jim Morrison moved to Paris, where he did heroin one night and drowned in a bathtub.
Other interesting musical releases included Caravans in the Land of the Grey and Pink, Don McLean's American Pie album, which included that wonderful eulogy to that Dutch post-impressionist painter. Elton John puts out Madman Across the Water, and the Beach Boys put out Surf's Up, one of their finest albums perhaps. Marvin Gaye releases his wonderful What's Going On, and Pink Floyd released Medal. And such is the quality of music released this year, none of those make my top 10. So what were the best and indeed worst albums of 1971? Let's get into it, shall we? Number 10 is Paul and Linda McCartney's Ram. This is a gorgeous piece of stoned whimsy with some remarkable vocal performances from Paul on tracks like Uncle Albert and the delicate Ram On. John Landau claimed that Ram was the nadir in the decomposition of 60s rock so far. But this time we're all traumatised by the breakup of the Fab Four, demanding closure, healing, apologies, explanations. But John Lennon had explicitly stated that the dream is over. But I think we were unprepared for the pastoral, whimsical oddity that is this record. This is a beautifully abstracted album that's lacking any grandiose themes. Rolling Stone described it as an album that whistles to itself. It has an innocence and a bliss which is all part of its charm, I think. Number 9 is Leonard Cohen's Songs of Love and Hate. This is Cohen's most emotionally intense album. My God, it's a cheery affair. And the title certainly sums up the thematic thrust of the record, with love encompassing the physical Last Year's Man, the emotional Famous Blue Raincoat, a beautiful cover version of which was done by Tori Amos, by the way. Not to mention the spiritual, of course, Joan of Arc. And I love Bob Johnstone's production on this. It's so stark and uncluttered, perfectly platforming the lyrics. And Paul Buckmaster's string arrangements tastefully punctuate these songs, providing the album with an ornate quality, shall we say. Number 8 is the Alice Cooper Group and Killer. This is a deranged and delicious offering from this band, from the 2 tracks Under My Wheels to Be My Lover, which are very much defined by the muscular guitar of Glenn Buxton. It is an album, much more than its predecessor, that came out the same year, that very much defines the iconography of this band, with the boa on the sleeve, of course, and that calendar with Alice at the end of a rope. I think that came with this album. From the melancholic and resigned Desperado to the, quite frankly, disturbing Dead Babies to the anthemic Under My Wheels. Was there ever a better album opener than that? The brattish sneer of this record is certainly one for the nose pickers and ne'er-do-wells amongst us. Number 7 is Yes and the Yes album. This is the de facto debut album as far as I'm concerned. And of course, the magic ingredient is Steve Howe, that brings with him that Chet Atkins-inspired progressive guitar melded with the wonderful Entwistle-esque dynamic bass of Chris Squire and Bill Bruford, of course. Not to mention the wonderful voice of John Anson and those harmonies that very much go to defining the sound of this band for the next decade. This album boasted songs that would make up this band's repertoire for the rest of their career, songs like Your Move, Yours Is No Disgrace with its bonanza-like theme, and of course the stratospheric Starship Trooper. This album established the band in America and got them some serious airplay on FM radio. Number 6 is Jethro Tull's Aqualung, with that lecherous old soap dodger that adorns the cover, who becomes a motif amongst those kind of social vignettes that populate side 1 before we get to the theme of side 2, which is the sneering contempt of organised religion. This is the most concept albums ever, but don't call it a concept album to Ian Anderson, he'll have him chewing his own beard off. The sneering tone of this album appealed to a very young John Lydon, who I think relished the exposure of hypocrisy and dishonesty on this one. All that plus the beautiful acoustic numbers, emaciated sound and iconic artwork. What is there not to love about this? Number 5 is David Bowie's Hunky Dory. It's a kaleidoscopic album described by AllMusic as a cinematic melange of high and low art, ambiguous sexuality, kitsch and class. And Rick Wakeman's vaudeville piano certainly announces itself on this record, accentuating the wealth and depth of material here and Bowie's influences from Changes, the Neil Young-inspired Quicksand, the soaring Life on Mars, as well as the dark acoustic number Andy Warhol. What is apparent here is Bowie's improved songwriting and sense of flair, I think. It's a touchstone for postmodern pop and that reinterpreting of pop traditions into a fresh daub of contemporary music. One that examines the influences of rock, folk and cabaret. Number 4 is Joni Mitchell's Blue. This was one of those albums that certainly introduced that paradigm of the solo singer-songwriter as Joni, Laurel Canyon troubadour. It evokes a sombre atmosphere as suggested by the title. It immerses the listener in a sense of mourning and heartbreak on both a personal and universal level. Personal, of course, because it reads like a diary entry, cataloguing loss and heartbreak, but also expresses a sense of universal regret of a generation, reeling from Altmont and the Manson murders, and even the breakup of the Fab Four, emblematic of a generation not coming together. Mitchell expresses a sense of deep personal loss after the breakup of a relationship with Graham Nash, but also a sense of one being orphaned by the death of the hippie nation. Number 3 is Led Zeppelin IV. This album's appeal lies in its exploration of different musical topographies, heavy metal, folk, pure rock and roll and blues. This is a huge album in terms of defining the sound and style of 70s hard rock. It expands on the band's previous albums, melding their majestic hard rock with mystical rural English folk, effectively deviating from that muscular, testicular rock they're renowned for. There's certainly a more profound sense of drama on this album, probably to do with the band's burgeoning obsession with mythology, religion, and of course the occult, and with haunted mansions and Ouija boards, which would see this band eventually plagued by a troublesome spirit. Number 2 is the Rolling Stones and Sticky Fingers. This album is a weary, drug-laden album from Brown Sugar, of course, which is a gleeful tune about slavery and interracial sex. Can't You Hear Me Knocking, which is a song I want played at my funeral, by the way, to the Pulsating Bitch, which is probably one of my favourite Stones numbers. But as AllMusic points out, it's the world weariness of this record that is striking, from the heart-tugging masterpiece that is Wild Horses, the I Got the Blues, a ravished late-night classic, and Sister Morphine, a horrifying overdose tale made even more striking by the meaty slide guitar of Ry Cooder. With its offhand stew of decadence, blues, country and outright malevolence, Sticky Fingers is the perfect introduction to the 1970s for this band. And number 1 for me is The Who and Who's Next. Much of this album, of course, rises from the ashes of the Lifehouse project. There's no thematic connection between this collection of rough and tumble songs, which just seem to work beautifully together. And it's on this album that Townsend develops an infatuation with synthesizers which certainly affect the overall mood as they wash over the numbers, adding nuance and texture, which doesn't in any way water down the essential who-ness of tracks like Won't Get Fooled Again or the subdued psychotic rage of Behind Blue Eyes. That's the real beauty of this album. It's absolutely packed with anger, sorrow, regret, passion and tumult. The rage is as affecting as the heartbreak and the humour on songs like My Wife. This album is definitely a real retreat from the 1960s, and it's an invigorating album is what it is, not just because of the principal players, but I think because of Townsend's writing. He lays his soul bare in ways that are funny, affecting, painful, but ultimately life-affirming. So what are the worst albums of 1971? Yoko Ono puts out Fly, David Crosby releases If Only I Could Remember My Name, described as a disgraceful performance by Robert Christgau. But for me the worst album is The Byrds and Bird Maniacs. This was an album that was ruined in post-production with the copious amounts of overdubs, the swampy morass of keyboards, horns, strings. It turns into just a complete splodge. This oral gingerbread manages to spoil what might have been not a bad Byrds album. So there you are, that's my rundown of 1971, the 10 best albums in my opinion, and a few of the worst. If you're new to this channel, please do click like, subscribe, check that notification bell, do all that stuff, it helps the algorithm. Other than that, I'll just leave you with my closing salvo. I hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.